let's move on. Now what I want to do is practice naming. Okay, it turns out that naming, just like with the Lewis dot and things like that, there's some stuff that we can actually carry over from previous notes or from previous sections. So the naming for covalence is very similar to ionic. At least it starts off very similar. So if we take a compound like water, okay, water is the common name for H2O. Okay, let's find out what the actual chemical name is. So the first element, okay, we use its normal name. So in other words, hydrogen, we're just going to use it as hydrogen. Okay, the second element gets an "ide" ending. So oxygen goes from being oxygen to oxide. Okay, just like ionic, right? We know that first element name, second element "ide." So question is, how did I know that hydrogen was the first element? Okay, if they're both nonmetals, which element can I actually say is the first one? Right? With ionic compounds, we always listed the metal first, or the cation first. But here, they're both nonmetals, so I can't list the metal first because I don't have a metal, right? Well, it turns out, if you think of the periodic table, or you look at the periodic table, okay, so here's my quick little sketch. What you do is you figure out which of the elements, meaning the two elements that are in your compound, which of the elements is further left. So hydrogen is here, and oxygen is over here. Whichever element is further left, that's the one you start with. Okay, so that's the first one. Easy enough. Now here's where it gets a little tricky, because besides the fact that it's made up of just nonmetals, you have to do one more thing in addition that we didn't have to do before when we named ionic compounds, and that is we have to give each name a prefix, and it's based on the number of atoms in each atom in the compound. So in other words, we go back up here and we look at the subscripts. So if hydrogen here, we have 2 of them. Oxygen, we only have 1. Okay, so what we do is we come over here, we go to the name, and we're going to add a prefix, meaning a front end to this name. Hydrogen, we have 2 of them. So we go over here to the prefixes, and it's di. So we would say this is dihydrogen. Then I look at the oxygen, I only have 1 of them, and so the prefix is mono. Now, since it would be monoxide if we added that O, right, we can actually drop this O, just in the case of oxide, because there's already an O there. So we'd call this dihydrogen monoxide, which means it's 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. Okay, now there's a couple little extra little tidbits. First of all, if we had only had 1 hydrogen here, okay, so for example, if I take another compound like carbon combined with 4 hydrogens, okay, carbon gets listed first. Okay, it's kind of the exception here. I know that normally you would do hydrogen first because it's on the left, but we're gonna name it based off of our carbon here. So it would be carbon, and then we have 4 hydrogens, so that would be tetrahydride. Okay, now I don't give this a mono prefix, and the reason is that it's the first element. So the first element in the name, which in this case is carbon, okay, if you only have 1 of them, like in this case, then I don't use mono. That's the only time. Like, you only use mono for the second name. You never give mono to the first name. Okay, the rest of the prefixes you can give to either one, okay, based on how many you have. So it's mono, di, tri. Tetra, the way I remember that one is Tetris. If you ever played the game Tetris, each piece in the Tetris game is made up of 4 boxes, so that just helps me remember that tetra is the prefix for 4. Then you've got penta, hexa, hepta, octa, nona, and deca. Okay, so the only difference between ionic naming and covalent naming really are these prefixes. You have to give prefixes to molecules. You don't give them to ionic compounds. So let's do a little bit of practice and then we are done. I want you to name this on your own and then I'll give you the answer. Okay, so pause the video, name the carbon compound here. If you can, go on and name this one as well, and then start the video and see if you got it right. Alright, let's see if you got it right. So we're going to list carbon first because it's further left on the periodic table. So this would be carbon, and then we have chlorine, but we're going to give it that "ide" ending, so this will be chloride, right? And then we need to give them prefixes. Now I only have 1 carbon, and since carbon is the first name here, I don't have to give it a mono. Okay, just the first element name, the first part of the name. I don't have to give monos to. Okay, so I would just keep it as carbon, but then I look at my chlorine and I have 4 of them, so this becomes tetrachloride. So it's carbon tetrachloride. Okay, then if I come down here I have again carbon and chlorine, which is going to be chloride, but the difference here is I have different subscripts. So since I have 2 of these, this is going to be dicarbon, and then 6 chlorides means hexachloride. So dicarbon hexachloride. Alright, so hopefully you got those. If not, please ask questions tomorrow. We'll go over this, and we'll see you then. Make sure that you complete your whisk, and make sure you create your hot question for this set of notes. Good night.